Buffalo, the Friends of the Lockwood Library, and the Charles Abbott Reading Fund. Since most of us already know Mr. Frank O'Hara's poetry, there's no need to say that he's the author of Meditations in an Emergency and of Second Avenue, a dramatist, an art critic, and the assistant curator of the Museum of Modern Art. In fact, the current issue of Audit, a literary magazine edited in Buffalo, is devoted to Mr. O'Hara's work. His intimate voice, his successful combination of the colloquial and the formal, his honesty, and his precision make him one of the most interesting poets writing in America today. Mr. O'Hara.
Well, I guess you had the best of me just then, but I'll try to carry on. I want to begin with a poem called Ode on Lust. I don't exactly know why, but I wrote a series of odes because in 1959, because partially I never dared write an ode because I thought it was so formidable a thing to write. So then I decided that I should just write some poems and call them all odes, and with a little luck it'll all work out. So I don't know if you'll think it does or not. Ode on Lust. Can you hear me all right? Asking little more than a squeal of satisfaction from a piece of shrapnel, the hero of a demi-force pounces cheerfully upon an exalted height, which shall hereafter be called Bath. Where in the magnified panorama of hysterical pageantry upon the heights stands Bath, he is standing in a lovely crater near the topmost peak. Mildly frowning, Bath adjourns to the crystal lake of his conception, but if he imitates his father, he is bathed in sin, no matter how high he climbs and bends. He loses his pearls on the slopes. He finds them again. Meanwhile, back at the crater, poor Bath, and poorer still are his pursuers, seeking only the momentary smile of clouds, and underneath a small, irresponsible glory that fits. In pursuing glory, are they not wise to take the path of pale eschewment? For who seeks Bath is the lover of lightning, burnt rather than burning. The avoidance of misery and pity is a harrowing task for one who must picture humanity upside down and singing. A smile then freezes in its charcoal, and like a girl in Conrad, one is the slave of an image, or like Aida begins a slave and ends singing under a stone, where only the other was to sing. Who has tears for any but these, though they hate them? These whose greed is simply an over-prodigal need of dispersal, whose individuality is silver, whose attention is solely upon the fragments of love as they die one by one, who, like Theodora, are stripped of their seeds by the whiteness of doves, till they stand with their arms spread, nude in the arena, become empresses. Now, the next poem is one of a series of poems that I wrote at work on my lunch hour, which City Lights is going to publish next year under the title Lunch Poems, because Ferlinghetti thought it was so amusing that anyone was sitting around typing during their lunch hour. So he said, why don't you put them together and we'll publish them as lunch poems. This one is called Adieu to Norman, Bonjour to Joan and Jean-Paul. It's for a friend of mine who was going to France, and I had to hurry up and do it because I was having a farewell lunch with him. It is 12:10 in New York, and I am wondering if I will finish this in time to meet Norman for lunch. Lunch. I think I am going crazy. What with my terrible hangover and the weekend coming up at excitement-prone Kenneth Koch, I wish I was staying in town and working on my poems at Jones' studio for a new book by Grove Press, which they will probably not print. But it is good to be several floors up in the dead of night, wondering whether you are any good or not, and the only decision you can make is that you did it. Yesterday I looked up the Rue Frémicourt on a map and was happy to find it like a bird flying over Paris et ses environs, which unfortunately did not include Seine-et-Oise, which I don't know, as well as a number of other things. And Alan is back talking about God a lot, and Peter is back not talking very much, and Joe has a cold and is not coming to Kenneth, although he is coming to lunch with Norman. I suspect he is making a distinction. Well, who isn't? I wish I were reeling around Paris instead of reeling around New York. I wish I weren't reeling at all. It is spring. The ice has melted. The Ricard is being poured. We are all happy and young and toothless. It is the same as old age. The only thing to do is simply continue. Is that simple? Yes, it is simple because it is the only thing to do. Can you do it? Yes, you can because it is the only thing to do. Blue light over the Bois de Boulogne, it continues. The Seine continues. The Louvre stays open, it continues. It hardly closes at all. The Bar Américain continues to be French. De Gaulle continues to be Algerian, as does Camus. Shirley Goldfarb continues to be Shirley Goldfarb. And Jane Hazen continues to be Jane Frolicker, I think. And Irving Sandler continues to be the balayeur des artistes, and so do I. Sometimes I think I'm in love with painting. And surely the Piscine d'Aligny continues to have water in it, and the floor continues to have tables and newspapers and people under them. And surely we shall not continue to be unhappy. We shall be happy, but we shall continue to be ourselves. Everything continues to be possible. René Char, Pierre Reverdy, Samuel Beckett, it is possible, isn't it? I love Reverdy for saying yes, though I don't believe it. The next poem is also a lunch poem. I just call poem. Khrushchev is coming on the right day. The cool graced light is pushed off the enormous glass piers by hard wind, and everything is tossing, hurrying on up. This country has everything but politesse, a Puerto Rican cab driver says. And 5 different girls I see look like Heidi Gimble with her blonde hair tossing, too. As she looked when I pushed her little daughter on the swing on the lawn. It was also windy. Last night we went to a movie and came out. UNESCO is greater than Beckett, Vincent said. That's what I think. Blueberry blintzes. And Khrushchev was probably being copped at in Washington. No politesse. Vincent tells me about his mother's trip to Sweden. Hans tells us about his father's life in Sweden. It sounds like Grace Hardigan's painting Sweden. So I go home to bed and names drift through my head. Purgatorio Mercado, Gerhard Schwartz, and Gaspar Gonzalez, all unknown figures of the early morning as I go to work. Where does the evil of the year go when September takes New York and turns it into ozone stalagmites, deposits of light? So I get back up, make coffee, and read François Villon, his life, so dark. New York seems blinding, and my tie is blowing up the street. I wish it would blow off, though it is cold and somewhat warms my neck. As the train bears Khrushchev on to Pennsylvania Station, and the light seems to be eternal, and joy seems to be inexorable, I am foolish enough always to find it in wind. The next poem is called Mary Desty's Ass. And it came out of finding an old book by Mary Desty about Isadora Duncan, and she was one of her disciples. But it's mostly about Mary Desty, which I thought was very funny to say, the true life of Isadora Duncan, and then talk about yourself all the time. In Bayreuth once, we were very good friends of the Wagners, and I stepped in once for Isadora so perfectly she would never allow me to dance again. That's the way it was in Bayreuth. The way it was in Hackensack was different. There one never did anything, and everyone hated you anyway. It was fun, it was clear, you knew where you stood. In Boston, you were never really standing. I was usually lying. It was amusing to be lying all the time for everybody. It was like exercise. It means something to exercise in Norfolk, Virginia. It means you've been to bed with a Negra, Well, it is exercise. The only difference is it's better than Boston. I was walking along the street of Cincinnati, and I met Kenneth Koch's mother, fresh from the Istanbul Hilton. She liked me, and I liked her. We both liked Istanbul. Then in Waukegan, I met a furniture manufacturer, and it wiped out all dreams of pleasantness from my mind. It was like being pushed down hard on a chair. It was like something horrible you hadn't expected, which is the most horrible thing. And in Singapore, I got a dreadful disease. It was amusing to have bumps, except they went into my veins and rose to the surface like Vesuvius. Getting cured was like learning to smoke. Yet I always loved Baltimore. The porches which hurt your ass, no, they were the steps. Well, you have a wet ass anyway, if they'd only stop scrubbing. And Frisco, where I saw Tumanova, the baby ballerina, except she looked like a cow. I didn't know the history of the ballet yet, not that that taught me much. Now, if you feel like you want to deal with Tokyo, you've really got something to handle. It's like Times Square at midnight. You don't know where you're going, but you know you're going. And then in Harbin, I knew how to behave. It was glorious. That was love sneaking up on me through the snow. And I felt it was because of all the postcards and the smiles and kisses and the grunts. That was love, but I kept on traveling. Thank you. This poem's called Ave Maria. Mothers of America, let your kids go to the movies. Get them out of the house so they won't know what you're up to. It's true that fresh air is good for the body, but what about the soul? That grows in darkness, embossed by silvery images. And when you grow old, as grow you must, they won't hate you. They won't criticize you. They won't know. They'll be in some glamorous country they first saw on a Saturday afternoon or playing hooky. They may even be grateful to you for their first sexual experience, which only cost you a quarter and didn't upset the peaceful home. They will know where candy bars come from and gratuitous bags of popcorn, as gratuitous as leaving the movie before it's over with a pleasant stranger whose apartment is in the Heaven on Earth building near the Williamsburg Bridge. Oh, mothers, you will have made the little tykes so happy, because if nobody does pick them up in the movies, they won't know the difference. And if somebody does, it'll be sheer gravy. And they'll have been truly entertained either way, instead of hanging around the yard or up in their room, hating you prematurely, since you won't have done anything horribly mean yet, except keeping them from the darker joys. It's unforgivable, the latter, so don't blame me if you won't take this advice, and the family breaks up, and your children grow old and blind in front of a TV set, seeing movies you wouldn't let them see when they were young. The next poem is called Naphtha. I don't know why. That has no significance whatsoever. It's just the word I always liked. Ah, Jean Dubuffet, when you think of him doing his military service in the Eiffel Tower in 1922 as a meteorologist, you know how wonderful the 20th century can be. And the gated Iroquois on the girders, fierce and unflinching-footed, nude as they should be, slightly empty like a Sonia Delaunay. There is a parable of speed somewhere behind the Indians' eyes. They invented the century with their horses and their fragile backs, which are dark. We owe a debt to the Iroquois and to Duke Ellington for playing in the buildings when they are built. We don't do much ourselves but fuck and think of the haunting metro and the one who didn't show up there while we were waiting to become part of our century. Just as you can't make a hat out of steel and still wear it. Who wears hats anyway? It is our tribe's custom to beguile. How are you feeling in ancient September? I am feeling like a truck on a wet highway. How can you? You were made in the image of God. I was not. I was made in the image of a sissy truck driver. And Jean Dubuffet painting his cows with a likeness burst in the memory. Apart from love, don't say it. I am ashamed of my century for being so entertaining, but I have to smile. This poem is called Metaphysical Poem, which I guess you may feel expresses no great interest in metaphysical poetry, which is probably correct. When do you want to go? I'm not sure I want to go there. Where do you want to go? Any place. I think I'd fall apart any place else. Well, I'll go if you really want to. I don't particularly care. But you will fall apart any place else. I can just go home. I don't really mind going there, but I don't want to force you to go there. You won't be forcing me, I just as soon. I wouldn't be able to stay long anyway. Maybe we could go somewhere nearer. I'm not wearing a jacket, just like you weren't wearing a tie. Well, I didn't say we had to go. I don't care whether you're wearing one. We don't really have to do anything. Well, all right, let's not. Okay, I'll call you. Yes, call me. The next poem is called Poem 2. Lana Turner has collapsed. I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head hard, so it was really snowing and raining, and I was in such a hurry to meet you, but the traffic was acting exactly like the sky, and suddenly I see a headline, Lana Turner has collapsed. There is no snow in Hollywood. There is no rain in California. I have been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful, but I never actually collapsed. Oh, Lana Turner, we love you. Get up. The next poem is called Poème en forme de soar, which I got the idea of the title from the Satie piece called poem called Peace in the Form of a Pear. And it seems sort of nice to do something, completely simple, but would do something else too, I hope. Poème en forme de soar. I ducked out of sight behind the sawmill. Nobody saw me because of the falls, the gates, the sluice, the tourist boats. The children were trailing their fingers in the water. And the swans, regal and smarty, were nipping their little fingers. I heard one swan remark, "That was a good enough nip, though they are not as interesting as sausages." And another reply, "Nor as tasty as those peasants we got away from the elephant that time." But I didn't really care for conversation that day. I wanted to be alone, which is why I went to the mill in the first place. Now I am alone and hate it. I don't want to just make boards for the rest of my life. I'm distressed. The water is very beautiful, but you can't go into it because of the gunk. And the dog is always rolling over. I like dogs on their little feet. I think I may scamper off to Winnipeg to see Raymond, but what'll happen to the mill? I see the cobwebs collecting already, and later those other webs, those awful predatory webs. If I stay right here, I will eventually get into the newspapers, like Robert Frost. Willow trees, they remind me of Desdemona. I'm so damn literary. And at the same time, the waters rushing past remind me of nothing. I'm so damned empty. What is all this vessel shit anyway? We are all rushing down the river happy times, ducking, poling, bumping, sinking, and swimming, and we arrive at the beach. The chaff is sand. Alone as a tree bumping another tree in a storm. That's not really being alone, is it? Signed, The Saw. The next thing is called Two Tragic Poems. 1. When the wheat got out of the can, a seascape, tumbling with sunny pines, your rib against my nose, gasping on the towel-roughened rock, the rock pool warmly smiling out what the summer thunk. I do not care if we never get back there, but we are, in new shorts, not quite as comfortable, and the tree still bending over the inlet as we hang, then drop into the freeze. 2. Out of the mild pleasantness of disaster, an acorn. You think you know what it means. It's sort of phallic or foolish, has a value. But you can't stuff a turkey with that, or a goose. It's not truffles. It doesn't break your heart. It doesn't even lean over and smile. Has no waste. I want you to take that cup down off the shelf and break it against the window. Then I will wash the window and the sun will shine through. That's the way things happen between people, though the roles get reversed. Like when a flower comes up too early in the spring and gets bitten and dies off. Summer is still in its troika, belting along the dirt road, raising a crowd of dust to hide everything disagreeable. Now I am going to open the hydrant, and when the fountain of ice is formed, I'm going to run in and out of it, as if it were a tree, and I'm a noose. Well, here are your morning papers. Kennedy is in Columbia. Cheers. The next poem is called Fantasy, and it's dedicated to the health of Allen Ginsberg. How do you like the music of Adolf Deutsch? I like it. I like it better than Max Steiner's. Take his score for Northern Pursuit. The Helmut Dantine theme was, and then the window fell on my hand. Errol Flynn was skiing by. Down, down, down went the grim gray submarine under the cold ice. Helmut was safely ashore on the ice. What dreams, what incredible fantasies of snow farts will this all lead to? I don't know. I have stopped thinking like a sled dog. The main thing is to tell a story. It is almost very important. Imagine throwing away the avalanche so early in the movie. I am the only spy left in Canada, but just because I'm alone in the snow doesn't necessarily mean I'm a Nazi. Let's see, 2 aspirins, a vitamin C tablet, and some baking soda should do the trick. That's practically an Alka-Seltzer. Alan, come out of the bathroom and take it. I think someone put butter on my skis instead of wax. Ouch, the lean-to is falling over in the furs, and there is another fatter spy here. They didn't tell me they sent him. Well, that takes care of him. Boy, were those huskies hungry. Alan, are you feeling any better? Yes, I'm crazy about Helmut Dantine, but I'm glad that Canada will remain free. Just free, that's all. Never argue with the movies. The next poem is called Blue Territory, and it's dedicated to Helen Frankenthaler. And actually, I don't know why, but she had a very big, beautiful painting in the Whitney Museum, and it gave me the idea for this poem, although it's a big abstraction. I don't know, why this is the result of seeing that. Big bags of sand until they came, the flattering end of the world. The gulls were swooping and gulping and filling the bags, as helpful creatures everywhere were helping to end the world, so we could be alone together at last, one by one. Who needs an ark, a captain's table? And the mountains never quite sink, all blue, or come back up, desire, the father of the messness of all. Cut the glass and make it grass, under tit and horn. It's not moss, it's turf. Get back on the boat, boss. We love you. You don't have to stay. Lobsters, bees, bobs, taboos. Where slug you then the flinty booze? A patetra of crepey secredity, of isness, unpropitious, blasted like, O roses, the serpent. Here I am, blue, blue, whoops, the gull is making a pomander, pouring pestilence of hollow, sweet smells. No, I'm drinking sweat and piss, yum yum, signed the human briar. Smiling pale, wailing is swinging, sit is up, on, fleece as I remember hair flowers, and the curling anemones of the thigh, Art Nouveau kissings. Brush your teeth, Archie, ma'am? Do I or don't I care package it? Be swizzled like a growling 6-sea rain, bollocksing. We hate the lot where the Indians run and ride and never fuck. There are no green eyelids advancing into the sea. The next poem is called Lawrence, meaning the one in Arabia. But I guess, no. So that you might see the odd nature of an just catastrophe, you might know the periphery, you might sense the nud, and then it would be very boring. But as it is, it will be interesting and fairly moving when everything goes down and the end seems like a sunset in the river. The postcard has been sent. I will say March, and it will not be interesting, and you will say February, and I will not be interested. It will not be gone away, and neither of us will have moved. Sick transit Mesopotamia. He is not ill, he is just determined, as the weak-willed will follow dreams instead of hallucinations there. This is not an opinion. There is a lot of sand in it. It's the general health. Now, I want to read sections of an ode to Michael Goldberg's birth and other births. And this is was supposed to be a birthday present, except that I never got to mention him in it. But I had to put him in the title. I don't remember anything of them down there around the Magnolias, where I was no more comfortable than I've been since, though aware of a certain neutrality called satisfaction sometimes. And there's never been an opportunity to think of it as an idyll, as if everyone been singing around me or around a tulip tree. A faint stirring of that singing seems to come to me in heavy traffic, but I can't be sure that's it. It may be some more recent singing, from hours of dusk in bushes, playing tag, being called in, walking up onto the porch, crying bitterly because it wasn't a veranda. Smell that honeysuckle? Or a door you can see through terribly clearly. Even the mosquitoes saw through it. Suffocating netting, or more often being put into a brown velvet suit and kicked around. Perhaps that was my last real cry for myself. In a forest, you think of birds. In traffic, you think of tires. Where are you? In Baltimore, you think of hats and shoes like Daddy did. I hardly ever think of June 27th, 1926, when I came moaning into my mother's world and tried to make it mine immediately by screaming, sucking, urinating, and carrying on generally. It was quite a day. I wasn't proud of my penis yet. How did I know how to act? It was 1936. No excuses now. Yellow morning, silent, wet, blackness under the trees over stone walls, hay smelling faintly of semen, a few sheltered flowers nodding and smiling at the clattering cutter bar of the mower ridden by Jimmy Whitney. I'd like to put my rollings into her. His brother Bailey leaning on his pitchfork watching. You shove it in and 9 months later comes out a kid. Ha ha. Where those flowers would dry out and never again be seen, except as cowflaps, hushed noon drinking cold water in the dusty field, their curly throats, big milk cans, full of cold spring water, sandy hair, black hair. I went to my first movie and the hero got his legs cut off by a steam engine in a freight yard. In my second, Karen Morley got shot in the back by an arrow. I think she was an heiress. It came through her bathroom door. There was nobody there. There never was anybody there at any time in sweet-smelling summer. I'd like to stay in this field forever and think of nothing but these sounds, these smells, and the tickling grasses. Up your ass, sport. Up on the mountainous hill behind the confusing house where I lived, I went each day after school and some nights with my various dogs. Up on the mountainous hill behind the confusing house where I lived, I went each day after school and some nights with my various dogs. The terrier that bit people, Arno the shepherd, who used to be wild but had stopped, the wirehead that took fits, and finally the boring, gentle cocker, spotted, brown, and white, named Freckles. There, the wind sounded exactly like Stravinsky. I first recognized art as wildness, and it seemed right to me. Climbing the water tower, I'd look out for hours in wind, and the world seemed rounder and fiercer, and I was happier, because I wasn't scared of falling off. Nor off the horses. To hell with the horses, bay and black. It's odd to have secrets at an early age, trysts, whose thoughtfulness and sweetness are those of a very aggressive person, carried beneath your shirt like an amulet against your sire. What one must do is done in a red twilight, on colossally old and dirty furniture with knobs. And on Sunday afternoons you meet in a high place, watching the Sunday drivers and the symphonic sadness. Stopped, a man in a convertible puts his hand up a girl's skirt. And again the twitching odor of hay, like a minor irritation that gives you a hard-on. And again the roundness of horse noises. Je suis là de vivre au pays natal, but unhappiness, like mercury, transfixed me there. Now repère de vipère, and had I known the strength and durability of those invisible bonds, I would have leaped from rafters onto prongs, then, and been carried shining and intact to the Indian cemetery near the lake. But there is a glistening blackness in the center, if you seek it. Here, it's capable of bursting into flame or merely gleaming profoundly in the platinum setting of your ornamental human ties and hates. Hanging between breasts, or cross-like on a chest of hairs, the center of myself is never silent. The wind soars, keening overhead, and the vestments of unnatural safety part to reveal a foreign land, toward whom I have been selected to bear the gift of fire, the temporary place of light, the land of air. Down where a flame illumines gravity and means warmth and insight, where air is flesh, where speed is darkness, and things can suddenly be reached, held, dropped, and known, where a not totally imaginary ascent can begin all over again in tears. In New Guinea, a Sunday morning figure reclining outside his hut in Lemoorish languor, and an Atterbury-dyed hat like a sick sun over his ebony land on your way to breakfast. He has had his balls sewed into his mouth by the natives who bleach their hair in urine and their will. A basketball game and a concert later if you live to write. It's not all advancing towards you. He had a killing desire for their women. But more killing still, the absence of desire, which in religion used to be called hope. I don't just mean the lack of a hard-on, which may be sincerity, or the last-minute victory of the proud spirit over flesh. No, a tangerine-like sullenness in the face of sunrise, or a dark sinking in the wind on the forecastle when someone you love hits your head and says, "I'd sail with you anywhere, war or no war." Who was about to die a tough blonde death, like a slender, blighted palm in the hurricane's curious hail and the maelstrom of bulldozers and metal sinkings, churning the earth, even under the fathomless depths below, beneath, where the one special went to be hidden, never to disappear, not spatial in that way. Take me, I felt, into the future fear of saffron pleasures, crazy strangeness and steam, of seeing a pearl-white whale, steam of being high in the sky, opening fire on corsairs, kept moving in berths where I trade some of the counterfeiters. I thought it was about personal freedom then, for a pint of whiskey, banana brandy in Manila, spidery steps trailing down onto the rocks of the harbor and up the black fur, the pyramidal whiteness, Genji on the Ginza, a lavender kimono-sized loneliness, and drifting into my ears off Sendai in the snow, Carl T. Fisher's Recollections of an Indian Boy. This tiny, over-decorated rock garden bringing obviously heart-shaped the Great Plains, as is my way to be obvious as an 8 o'clock in the dining car of the 20th Century Limited Express, and its noisy blast passing buttes to be Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe, Baltimore and Ohio, Cumberland, leaving beds in Long Beach for beds in Boston via CDB 47-6, pretty girls in textile mills, drowsing on bales in a warehouse of cotton, listening to soft southern truck talk. Perhaps it is your miraculous low roar on Ulysses as the sailors pee into funnels, ambassadors of green beer interests bigger than Standard Oil in the South Pacific, where the beaches flower with cat eyes and ear fungus, warm as we never wanted to be warm, in an ammunition dump, my foot again crushed, this time by a case of 40 millimeters. The only thing you ever gave New Guinea was your toenail, and now the Australians are taking over. The pony of war. To return, safe who will never feel safe, and loves to ride steaming in the autumn of centuries of useless aspiration towards artifice. Are you feeling useless too, old paint? I am really an Indian at heart, knowing it is all over but my own ceaseless going, never to be just a hill of dreams and flint for someone later, but a hull laved by the brilliant Celebi's response, empty of treasure to the explorers who sailed me not. King Philip's Trail, lachrymose highway of infantile regrets and cayuse meannesses. Mendelssohn driving me mad in Carnegie Hall like greed, grasping Palisades Park smiling, you pull a pretty ring out of the pineapple and blow yourself up, contented to be a beautiful fan of blood above the earth-empathic earth. I am assuming that everything is all right and difficult, where hordes of stars carry the burdens of the gentler animals like ourselves with wit and austerity beneath a hazardous settlement, which we understand because we made and secretly admire. Because it moves, yes, for always, for it is our way, to pass the tea house and the ceremony by and rather fall sobbing to the floor with joy and freezing than to spill the kid upon the table and then thank the blood for flowing as it must throughout the miserable, clear, and willful life we love beneath the blue. A fleece of pure intention sailing like a pinto in a bark of slaves, who soon will turn upon their captors, lower anchor, found a city riding there, of poverty and sweetness paralleled among the races without time. And one alone will speak of being born in pain, and he will be the wings of an extraordinary liberty. Political poem on the last line of Pasternak's, and the line is a certain person's epoch burning. A certain person's epoch burning. Religious philosophy would like assurances. There are lesser problems which, minimum number of standees, exhortations, and analyses. The irony is that despite earnment partnership, Mr. Meyer is in some degree, the movement, and again, at the moment, 163 countries microwave, wireless, or landline, or can AT&T be regulated? Yet, at this moment, Marburg is forgotten. The light drifts slowly through, vine-like curtains of white, while up the stairs someone is pouting in tangled sleep. Across the grass, the boring little redbreasts trot and thump on worms. The grass soothes itself and purrs onward into the street under the house. Over the studio the wind reaches for where lucid blossoms, where in spring the Polish pain of snow has melted, the statistics have become keyboards and scratches on an old Chabrier record, though the death is dressing as always before, an enormous mirror which isn't the sea. How do you get to Spain and eat grapes, and only grapes? The second poem in this series is also political, but not to, it's sort of against politics, I guess. This is called Poem. Hoopla, ya, ya, ya. In the concentration camp, White Hope, we always flicked it off that way, hot lead, to show the melody of informers, a banana, bandana, and then the spangled eyelids, what the heap said to the eagle, closed their mouths for, and then the news, a moment of thought-out noise. I want nothing of, a gossipy novel can sink a ship, the billboard said. Charlie Brown, you are a traitor, and all the heads agreed sagely. It's better to be known only, eclipsed ugliness, to your soi-disant lover. He's nice to have around disapproval, what we will often wonder about and long. The next poem is called Poem VFW. I don't know if you doubt it, but I think you do. I am independent of the Cabaret Voltaire, the Café Grinzing, the Black Cat, the Anubis. Two parallel lines always meet, except mentally, which brings on their quarrels. And if I sit down, I admit it is not at a table underneath elms to read. You were walking down a street softened by rain, and your footsteps were quiet, and I came around the corner, inside the room, to close the window, and thought, what a beautiful person, and it was you. No, I was coming out the door, and you looked sad, which you later said was tired, and I was glad you had wanted to see me, and we went forward back to my room to be alone in your mysterious look. Among the relics of post-war hysterical pleasures, I see my vices lying like abandoned works of art, which I created so eagerly to be worldly and modern and with it. What? I can't remember. I see them with your eyes. Next poem is called Old Copies of Life magazine. It's in 3 sections. Oh God, someone protect the Champs-Élysées. I just saw that Frenchman's face again in tears. They may have reached the Arc de Triomphe, but at least they didn't get it apart and set it up near the fake Picasso in Hamburg. He was stuck in an ad for a book on World War II. 2. In the center of this gray blur, there is quite an ugly costume, but then, how would I know? It may be beautiful. Especially in Manchester, in Hants, and along the beautiful brown expanse of the Gaboon River in a barge, now that we have exchanged all our cultural traditions so equitably forced. 3. Yearly, it became grander, bigger, thicker, familiarer. It began to look fortunate in the sense of money, smiles, and worked-for disasters. This poem is called Louise. Sometimes I think I see a tiny figure sidling through the bush. Yes, there, at the edge of the forest, blinking in new light. It must have wandered up from down under. I believe it's Maldoror. And now, having decided, it starts the weary trek across the rolling plain, pausing occasionally beneath a shade or on the gently sloping rise. it rests, too, on the crater of a long-defunct volcano, lying down for a time in its wrinkles. Then onward again, through the valley bounded by twin peaks, pink in the sunlight, with the scattered forests coming down right to the edge of the pass. Disappearing for almost a day, or is it night, the toiling figure suddenly finds itself in a clearing, suddenly to me. Then there is an upheaval, rather like an earthquake. It clings for dear life to the nearest overhanging branch. There it is, stranded in the blue gaze, and the gaze is astonished, eye to eye, a speck and a vastness staring back at it. Why, it's Louise. Hi, Louise. I think the last poem is called Poem. I mean, I know it's called Poem. I don't know as I get what D.H. Lawrence is driving at when he writes of lust springing from the bowels. Or do I? It could be the bowels of the earth. To lie flat on the earth in spring, summer, or winter is sexy. You feel it stirring deep down slowly up to you, and sometimes it gives you a little nudge in the crotch. That's very sexy. And when someone looks sort of raggedy and dirty like Paulette Goddard in modern times, it's exciting. It isn't usual or attractive. Perhaps DHL is thinking of the darkness. Certainly the crotch is light. And I suppose any part of us that can only be seen by others is a dark part. I feel that about the small of my back, too, and the nape of my neck. They are dark. They are erotic zones as in the tropics, whereas Paris is straightforward and bright about it all. A coal miner has kind of a sexy occupation, though I'm sure it's painful down there. But so is lust. Of light we can never have enough. But how would we find it unless the darkness urged us on and into it? And I am dark, except when now and then it all comes clear, and I can see myself, as others luckily sometimes see me, in a good light. So thanks. Too long?
Mr. O'Hara suggests we'd like to ask him to read any poems if he's glad to do so. I have just two quick announcements. One is that Student Bookshop invites any of you who want to come and have a drink. Can't guarantee that it's risky enough. After the meeting. Also, Audit Magazine will be for sale. Anybody who wants a copy. It contains entirely the work of Mr. O'Hara. And one last thing, the next reading, for those of you, a lot of you have asked about it, I gather that the next readings are as follows. On October...
Gee, I don't have it with me. Oh, you have it?
Please autograph it or second this hand column.
Sure. Actually, is that